Over Montgomery, a total of 13 people were injured at a party in an overnight mass shooting.
More than 360 shots were fired at a crowded party in North Montgomery.
A homicide shortly before that. We had a robbery shortly before that.
9 people shot at the party. The interim police chief saying that as many as 1,000 people were there.
And another shooting shortly before that.
Some of the injured are children. 3 people were also hurt when they were hit by cars or by broken glass. And PD says it all happened near North Pass Road.
The violence in Montgomery, Alabama continues. Montgomery is now ranked as the second most deadly small-sized city in the country. Cities in the Deep South and adjacent states dominate this list. It's no secret that the common denominator between these cities is that they are African American cities in the Deep South. What is going on in the heart of Alabama? Just to the north of Montgomery is Birmingham. We just did a video on the violence there, which is on the same level. Birmingham, Alabama is now the most dangerous city in the United States by homicide rate. I was surprised to find that in the comments, many people are starting to talk about the real reasons why violence is so prevalent in this part of Alabama. Covert racism still exists to a heavy degree, and many people would like to omit or not even talk about the real causes of the violence in Alabama. But on our Birmingham videos, we're starting to see a lot of people come out and say, no, this is what's really happening. People in Alabama do know the reason why there's so much violence. However, due to covert racism, they want to keep it that way. They don't want to talk about these issues. They don't want to acknowledge that these things exist. That is why when we talk about these topics, you'll see many people in the comment section saying that I'm outright lying. The notion of speaking on these topics is something they don't like, they're uncomfortable with, because they don't want things to change. They know that their stance is wrong. That's why they totally avoid the topic, because they know they can't win these arguments. In the case of Montgomery, Alabama, in the last few months, we've seen a robbery turned murderous, with 3 Latinos losing their life, employees and customers indiscriminately targeted in a robbery that was specifically targeting Latino businesses. The reason why these robberies are targeting Latinos is because law enforcement in Alabama, including the city of Montgomery and Birmingham, refuses to investigate any crime that's perpetrated against a Hispanic. Just about every single Latino business in the city of Montgomery has been targeted. Recently, we saw those 3 people lose their lives, but then they doubled back and robbed them again, stealing the fund for the family of the victims, cementing the notion that in Alabama, criminals are not afraid of the law as long as the victims are immigrants. Sadly, the homicide after that, another Hispanic victim was killed by another Hispanic victim in the vicinity not too long after these events unfolded. However, even more recently, a 5th Hispanic victim has been killed at a gas station in Montgomery, all based around the same road that goes around the southern edge of the city. This final victim already has suspects wanted. These suspects are African American. The victim was a young man who was gunned down outside of a gas station, making this the 5th Hispanic to be killed in Montgomery in just a few months. With as small as the Montgomery Latino population is, this is a terrifying analytic. It seems that rather even Hispanics are starting to join on the slaughter of their own people. Anybody knows that if you target a minority in Alabama, law enforcement will usually not put any effort into investigating these crimes, and that has given criminals the free rein to target these people indiscriminately. And even when you remind them that you are a U.S. citizen, you own property, and you have a concealed carry permit, law enforcement continues to tell you that you are illegal and that you do not have rights to access the resources of the state of Alabama. This situation has become even more aggravating in African American majority cities like Birmingham and Montgomery, as it is African American gangs who take the most leisure in targeting minorities for robberies, knowing that law enforcement will be lagging in their response. Law enforcement in the state of Alabama has long distanced itself from the African American community and refused to intervene in their personal issues, allowing murders and homicides and crimes to take place between these communities, and law enforcement sit there as decoration, not getting involved. After all, these are internal issues within these communities, and law enforcement, predominantly being white, doesn't want to be involved in African American issues, understandable in the Deep South. So the new influx of Korean migrants working in auto industry and Latinos moving to Alabama looking for affordability has led to an interesting situation. Already in place is the ideology from law enforcement of not getting involved in other communities' affairs, and thus these new communities trying to assert themselves in Alabama are finding the situation that literally the law enforcement is against them and the criminals are targeting them. Despite Birmingham and Montgomery having some of the highest homicide rates in the country, law enforcement is more actively seeking Hispanics to see if their driver's license is valid. Many times law enforcement will extort these individuals for cash, and thus law enforcement is not out there trying to catch the people that are perpetrating these crimes or patrolling the most dangerous neighborhoods. They're spending all of their time going after the Latino community. Many times law enforcement in Alabama will extort these individuals. When you see a city like Birmingham, Alabama, that now has the highest homicide rate in the United States, and the law enforcement in that city is spending more time around trailer parks and neighborhoods that have larger Hispanic communities to find somebody they can victimize or extort, should give you an idea that if the law enforcement is occupied with those activities, criminals have free rein to do whatever they want in the city's most dangerous areas. In the past, the core of Hispanic immigrants were Mexicans and other Central Americans that were somewhat of a pushover when it came to extortion and when it came to being easy victims of robberies. However, many of the Latinos that are moving to Alabama today are Colombians, Venezuelans, and Cubans. Not only do they have full legal status in the United States, but they're definitely not pushovers who are going to let somebody rob them. And many times these individuals are going to be fighting back and putting up more resistance than other immigrants. Like was the case with myself, where they thought they were going to have an easy robbery and they had the surprise of a lifetime. Despite the fact that the white and black population in Alabama have had issues for centuries, these individual criminals are not going after the white population who's been discriminating them, but they prey upon their own communities, turning their own neighborhoods into living hells for the people who live there of their own race. In the past, when racism was mostly covert, the African American community was prey of the African American criminals. After the Montgomery brawl, a clear denoting factor was evident that in Alabama there are racial tensions. Now everybody knew this, but covert racism was a mode of operation. However, passive-aggressive actions in Alabama, the way racism has always worked in the past, no longer works in Alabama. Too many people are coming into the picture who don't even understand microaggressions. The rules of segregation and, of course, of racism and covert racism in Alabama has always been rules that the people of Alabama secretly follow, an unspoken rule of racism in Alabama where both the whites and the blacks are all segregationists, and despite the fact they're not on the same team, they are on the same agenda of segregationism, and thus today many of the young criminals are not really going for the covert racism. Social media, recent national events, and of course the Montgomery brawl as the general ideology that the youth today simply doesn't follow the rules of past generations means that racism in Alabama is no longer covert, and thus you're having direct aggressions, direct actions. The covertness of racism in Alabama is most likely a thing of the past. Today, people have become vocal. Certain individuals in politics have given people the notion that they can be bold and express their hate openly with no fear of retaliation. And thus, we're seeing now in Alabama, not so much of covert racism like in the past, but a more open, direct, aggressive racism. Without a doubt, the state of Alabama right now is literally involved in a race war. Many of the peoples that are involved in this situation are doing it for an economical benefit. They're robbing people for their own monetary gain. If there's nothing to gain, then there's nothing to engage for. But in the state of Alabama, The economy itself is up for grabs. African American communities like Montgomery and Birmingham have already had to fight this economical war to get a piece of the pie in Alabama, and much of the commerce in Alabama today is in the hands of African Americans. What many people do not understand about Alabama is that in Alabama, the African American labor force or community in itself is somewhat of an aggressor. In the past, the African Americans were seen as a victim. However, today in the state of Alabama, African Americans have become very defensive, both economically and in other realms. The theories of Martin Luther King didn't really fit the narrative of the people of Alabama. They've had to fight for every inch they have, and today the African American community has become somewhat of a bully in the state of Alabama. Just like the Klan kept whites in power, African Americans have had to create their own sort of methods to devise power and keep it within their community. This has segregated economically the state of Alabama. And this system was held together by a hate amongst the whites and the blacks and the agreement on segregation by both of these predominant races. However, the Latinos and the Asians aren't going for that. They move into Alabama, they set up shop, and they cater to everybody, literally doubling their power of acquisition by helping the white and the black community with their services. And many people in Alabama are starting to catch on to the notion that racism really does have a massive economical impact, a very negative economical impact. Now, the people of Alabama know this notion, but they're starting to see how it doesn't work for them. People today are trying to acquire economical means, and they're seeing that the individuals that come from other places have a much better economical outlook simply by not playing by the rules of a segregated economy that Alabama to this day carries on. Montgomery's economy has been literally crippled. A predominantly black city surrounded by rural white communities in a state that's economically segregated means the opportunities of income are seriously limited. All the while, in the heart of these cities, criminals who prey upon their own community have made the cities living hells for the people that are trying to survive in them. In the past, again, African Americans and whites were both for segregation. However, that segregation, that economical segregation, has been economically crippling the Deep South. And with social media, content from other places reaching Alabama, people from other places reaching Alabama, many of the people from Alabama are starting to realize that they no longer want to play into the role of Southern segregation. They want a piece of the economical pie. They want businesses. They want new homes. They want to live in suburban areas, and they want to enjoy the economical prosperity that comes from free trade. Atlanta is only 2 hours down the road from Montgomery. Alabama is starting to see that the racism is causing a lot of harm to their communities. I'm going to elaborate a little bit into how racism and the segregationism has played a role into making life in Alabama literally miserable for people. If you've lived in Alabama most of your life, this would be a good time for you to listen and say very little, because for you, perhaps the things that happen in Alabama are normal, and perhaps you're not able to capture and really understand the scope of how much racism has destroyed your state, because after all, to you this is normal. But anybody like myself who came from an outside environment and lived in Alabama quickly starts to realize how much racism is hurting Alabama. Now, the belief in segregationism is that both whites and blacks agree that segregation and being separate is good for everybody. However, today in the world we live in, that notion doesn't exist. We live in a capitalistic country and a capitalistic economy, and the bigger the numbers are, the better off you are. The smaller the numbers are, the more crippled you're going to be economically. Today, more than ever, Americans are living close to larger metropolitan areas, and the more remote rural parts of America are suffering. The dependence on this grid that's been developed with free trade, highways, large cities, means that people depend on other people. And if you ostracize or marginalize a segment of that population, it only works to your own detriment. Here are some vague examples of day-to-day life in the state of Alabama, situations that are normal in Alabama related to racism and segregation, that doesn't happen in other states. Every single day, I calculated while living in Alabama, racism or the upholding of segregationist ideologies stole at least an hour and a half from my productivity every single day. If I left my home in Alabama to work an 8-hour shift throughout the day, I would lose an hour and a half of my time as a direct result of the bureaucracy of Southern segregationism. To give you an example, here in Florida, if I go into a Starbucks line to get my breakfast, I can have it in less than 6 minutes. While living in Alabama, the closest Starbucks in Prattville took minimum 45 minutes to produce the same exact breakfast. Not only does that cripple the company that's investing in the state of Alabama, but it steals time from every single customer waiting in that line, causing a trickle-down effect on society. Later on in the day, if I wanted to have a McChicken and a Coke and fries, the same scenario, up to 45-minute wait, sometimes even about an hour just to get a McChicken, fries, and Coke. So why is customer service so bad in the state of Alabama? Many people will tell you that Southern hospitality, people take their time, but we all know that's a sack of potatoes. The real reason why it takes so long for customer service in the state of Alabama can be related directly to the racial politics of the state. The black people refuse to work hard because the white person might remember the days of slavery. And the white people say, if the black people refuse to work, I'm not going to work either. It literally becomes a competition everywhere in Alabama to see which of the two races is willing to be the least productive. To uphold sentiment for their slavery, the African American community in Alabama and much of the Deep South has said, we're not going to work, we're not going to be productive, we're not going to contribute to your society because you exploited us. And then the white man says, well, if the black people aren't going to work, I'm better than them. So if they don't get to work, neither do I. And it literally becomes a competition in the state of Alabama between the whites and the blacks on which race can drag their feet more. Basically, neither the African Americans nor the whites in Alabama have got over the sentiments of the Civil War. And it's crippled the economy of cities like Montgomery. Let me tell you guys a story from when I lived in Alabama. I was at a gas station on the west side of Birmingham. This is the most dangerous part of the city. There was about 7 people waiting in a line. The cashier is behind one of those glass cases so nobody can shoot them. There was a white male, a construction worker in working equipment, and he was in line in front of me. Now, his vocabulary was, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, thank you. Everybody that walked inside of that store referred to themselves as the N-word. And not in a friendly, like, oh, what's up, now? More like, hey, person, why don't you get the gas pump rolling? Hey, person, why are you in line? Hey, why didn't this person hold the door for me? Hey, why does... I noticed that every single person there, they were all black besides me and this white dude, called themselves the N-word, and they treated each other like absolute garbage. The African American people in Alabama treat each other foremost like garbage. They don't have any love or respect for their African American brother. They don't look at their African American brother as, let me hold the door for you. They look at it like, why is this person in the way? In stark difference, this individual, the white person, said things like, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, let me hold the door for you, and was just a completely different person. In this scenario, I learned something about the people of Alabama. And this is something that my friend from Alabama also cemented into me. It's something that I needed to learn about the people of Alabama. My friend told me, hey, Jose, you want us to love you. We don't even love each other. How can we love other people when we don't even love ourselves? This was an African American friend in Alabama who told me this. I started to look around and be more aware of my surroundings and how people in Alabama treat each other, and there's a lack of love and respect for other people. The people of Alabama can't even start to handle the hate that they have for other people. They first have to work on loving themselves. If you don't treat yourself right, How can you treat other people when you don't even treat yourself? Currently, the city of Montgomery has one of the worst school systems in the country. The schools don't even have central air conditioning, don't even have windows. Many times it's just plywood on the windows. The schools are a complete nightmare. The homicide rate is the second highest of any city in the country its size, and all the other cities on that list are also adjacent cities in the Deep South, like Baton Rouge, Jackson, Mississippi. All these cities are kind of the same. Not only is the education system in crumbles, homicide and crime is the highest in the country in this region. Incomes are horrendous. Real estate prices are literally worthless in Alabama. The reason I ended up here was looking for the best real estate values, and that was a huge mistake. I didn't really understand the reason why real estate in Alabama is worth so little. Now I live in Sarasota, one of the most expensive cities in the country, because I understand the value of what you pay for. See, I thought I could stretch my money and get more real estate and more bang for my buck, but then I realized the reason why this real estate was worth nothing, and I understood what made real estate valuable. And today I live in one of the most expensive cities because I understand the value of real estate. Why is the city so expensive? There's a lot of reasons why it's better to live here where I live now. Safety, education, beaches. I got my GED recently. There's so many options for education in the area that I live in that I finally, as an adult, got my GED recently. I dropped out or got kicked out of high school in the 9th grade in Florida, and I never obtained to it. But now that I lived in this city, there's so many options that I was able to get my education on. I'm not worried about my safety in the Sarasota metropolitan area. And of course, everything that I need is accessible. My internet speed is 300 to 400 for upload and download. The Starbucks, there's 6 or 7 Starbucks here in the community where I live, and there's 6 or 7 Publixes, and they're opening new stores. Literally, I don't have to drive with a gun to a store across town to get something. I can just walk downstairs and have Starbucks, Publixes, stores, restaurants, all that in the community I live in. Fast internet speed. Sure, my house in Montgomery in Alabama was affordable. But if every single time I go outside to work, I have to spend 45 minutes at a Starbucks drive-thru on the way to work, that comes up to a lot of hours at the end of the year. And those hours could have been used not to sit at a Starbucks drive-thru line, but to work, to produce more. And really, a place like Alabama drains away your productivity. If you give people just enough to survive, they will never accomplish anything in their lives. And that's exactly what the state of Alabama does. It gives people just enough so they don't starve and they don't have to work too hard, and people are content in that state. However, that is the manipulation of racism, to hold you down, but hold you down comfortably. A condition that the state of Alabama mastered during the times of slavery is knowing how much comfort you can give somebody to get productivity out of them. And it's sad that this still is the same exact condition that the African Americans of Alabama are in today. All the movies about the days of slavery romanticize the idea if you treat one person just a little bit better, if you give them just enough, how loyal they'll be. And in fact, most of these movies, like the Django, you can just go on, the list is endless, of movies that illustrate the power of loyalty derived from the idea of giving somebody just enough comfort. Well, hey, what are y'all complaining about? We let you guys rob these Mexicans whenever you feel like it. We let you have cell phones and prostitutes in prison. We let you have TVs in prison. Well, we even let you leave prison every once in a while. We're treating y'all right. Hey, if you want to kill another one of these people out here, we're not even going to arrest you for it. Now, how much better could the Alabama white man treat the Alabama brothers down there? I almost said the wrong word, bless my heart. And that's really the notion, people. And if you are in Alabama and you want to free yourself from the conveniences of Alabama, know that when you take your family to a better place, you're going to have to work more. You're going to have to be more respectful to other people. You're going to have to be more considerate to other people. You're going to have to give life more, because the benefits that we have here in the free world include the fact that you are enslaved economically and that you do have to provide something productive to society. A notion that may be impossible to you as a native-born Alabaman is that your value in society is not what you can take from society, food stamps, SSI, benefits, but what you give to society. And that is why many people refuse to leave the comforts of Alabama to have to go work hard to live somewhere better, because they understand that when they leave Alabama, they're going to have to give the world more. And there's somewhat of a comfort level with living in a place that expects nothing from you because it expects nothing from anyone. But just like that runaway slave had to risk his freedom and run hard and long to find somewhere where he could live in real peace, in real security, and have his own power, not deprived like a slave that he was in, those slaves that refuse to live that plantation are always going to be nothing more than slaves. Many of the slaves would tell runaways, hey, we're comfortable here. The master gives us this and gives us a place to sleep. You going to run away? It seems that a lot of people would really prefer the comfort of their good, comfortable plantation than going out there and being a runaway and figuring out things for themselves. And this is the trap of Alabama. It's to keep these people unproductive and not give them the opportunity to be productive, to prove that they too can make a great, successful society. And it's a lie that's been perpetrated to segregation. But a lot of people are starting to wake up and say, hey, you know what? I'm tired of getting beat. I'm tired of being abused. I'm tired of not having my worth. I'm going to run away. A lot of people in Alabama, if you care about your family, you really do got to get out of Alabama, because things in Alabama have not changed at all. The lie continues to be perpetrated, and Alabama is becoming an infinitely more dangerous place than it's ever been. I remember taking a family member from Florida to see some of the historical monuments in Montgomery that are related to the Civil War. And every time we would do that, there would be black people, panhandlers, that would come and panhandle and ask for money from the people that are going to these places that have a lot of sentiment, not just to the people of Alabama, to everybody in the United States. We all studied American history. We all have our feelings about it. But it just goes to show that in Montgomery, the people in Montgomery don't even have respect for the civil rights monuments that are there for them. And if they can extract something from that, if they can exploit their own civil right history to take $5 or $10 from a tourist, they'll do it. It's embarrassing and shameful. And it's an example of how in Alabama, people simply don't love themselves, don't respect themselves. I had an even more educated person come up to me and tell me, look, you see that building over there? That's a courthouse where 2,000 slaves were hanged and beaten for no reason. And now that I think about it, the city of Montgomery continues to do the same exact thing, except for now it's not in a courthouse downtown. It's outside of a gas station. It's at a grocery store. It's pretty much anywhere in the city of Montgomery you can see somebody dead.